Late in the afternoon on a chilly day in early 2024, Ukrainian command centers began receiving reports that shifted the strategic situation around Kupansk. Russian units were no longer holding their positions, they were actively moving. Kupansk was not a mere symbol or political prize, it was a vital rail and supply hub, the kind of location that sustains an entire front or allows it to quietly collapse. That afternoon, Russian forces were concentrating to the southeast of the city, while Ukrainian reserves were still hours away. This was not a moment for speeches or heroic last stands. It was a moment measured in minutes. Ukrainian commanders faced a stark, unforgiving question. How much time could be bought when victory was no longer the goal and survival was paramount? To grasp why this question was so critical, it is necessary to examine the intelligence gathered around Kupansk and understand why delay itself had become a strategic objective. By the time Ukrainian commanders turned their focus to the Kupansk sector, intelligence reports were already pointing clearly in one direction. Russian forces were massing southeast of the city, not in defensive formations but in configurations that indicated preparations for movement. Surveillance data showed units arriving from multiple directions, converging, refueling, and reorganizing. This was not typical behavior of a force trying to hold ground. It was the posture of a force preparing to advance. The signs were hard to ignore. Drone footage and electronic monitoring confirmed repeated vehicle movement along access routes, while artillery assets were repositioned to cover the forward axis. Analysts assessed that at least 2 battalion-sized maneuver elements were involved, supported by tanks, armored vehicles, and indirect fire systems. This level of coordination pointed to an offensive operation designed to push forward, not merely probe defenses. The concern was not just the number of vehicles, but the rapid pace at which they were assembling. For the Ukrainian command, uncertainty was not the issue. The problem was time. Main reserve units were already engaged on other parts of the front where pressure was equally intense, and withdrawals were not an option. Reinforcements designated for Kupansk were available but still hours away, and in modern warfare, those hours can determine whether a front line bends or breaks. The gap between warning and response was shrinking by the minute. Kupansk mattered because of its function, not its symbolism. The city sits on a rail network that supplies multiple defensive positions across northeastern Ukraine, enabling fuel, ammunition, and personnel to move faster than any road convoy could. It also serves as a hub connecting lateral supply routes between neighboring sectors, meaning that a loss here would not remain isolated. Pressure at Kupansk would radiate outward, forcing units on adjacent fronts to adjust, stretch thin, or retreat in response. Had Russian forces broken through quickly, the impact would not have been a sudden collapse, but a slow, perilous unraveling. Supply lines would come under threat. Artillery units would lose steady resupply, and commanders would be compelled to divert resources just to stabilize the situation. This is how fronts fail in modern warfare, not with sudden disasters, but through accumulating small losses that outpace repair efforts. It is crucial to understand that this was not an intelligence failure. Ukrainian forces clearly saw the buildup, tracked the movements, and comprehended the intent behind them. What they lacked was the luxury of perfect timing. Knowing what was coming did not guarantee an immediate stop, especially when available forces were already stretched thin and across hundreds of kilometers. Yet waiting carried its own set of risks. Holding positions without taking immediate action would have allowed Russian forces the opportunity to deploy on their own terms, select advantageous terrain, and initiate their assault with full coordination between armored units and artillery. Every additional minute spent waiting increased the likelihood that the initial encounter would occur too close to Ukrainian defenses, where options for reaction would be severely limited and casualties more difficult to manage. Once lost, the initiative is extremely challenging to reclaim under enemy fire. Ukrainian commanders faced a difficult choice among 3 unfavorable options. They could attempt to hold their ground with insufficient forces, risking being overwhelmed. They could withdraw early, trading territory for safety, but enabling Russian units to advance closer to Kupansk unopposed. Or they could pursue a more precarious strategy, using limited resources to buy time, while accepting a high level of tactical risk. This critical moment defined the situation around Kupansk. The intelligence was clear, the stakes were understood, and the clock was already ticking. With no reinforcements immediately available, Ukrainian leadership had to quickly decide whether to hold, trade ground, or trade time. Delay itself had become a liability, and commanders recognized that waiting for a perfect solution would result in losing all options. Thus, the order emphasized speed, clarity, and a singular objective. A small force would advance, not to outright stop the Russian advance, but to slow it just long enough for the broader defense system to respond. In modern warfare, that distinction is crucial. Though simple in concept, the mission was inherently dangerous. Two Bradley infantry fighting vehicles accompanied by a small infantry element were tasked with delaying and disrupting the enemy, rather than holding territory or engaging decisively. There was no expectation of a traditional victory, nor any plan to destroy an enemy formation. The sole goal was to buy time, measured in minutes and hours rather than territory. Bradleys were chosen for this role because they provide a rare combination of speed and firepower. They can quickly relocate under pressure yet maintain stable firing accuracy while maneuvering. Their tow missiles allow crews to engage enemy armor at long range, often beyond the reach of effective return fire. While their 25mm Bushmaster cannon can suppress lighter vehicles and infantry without requiring close-quarters combat. This combination enables a small unit to project strength disproportionate to its size, at least temporarily. Survivability was also a key factor, especially against expected artillery strikes. While Bradleys are not tanks, their armor and internal design offer crews improved protection against near misses and fragmentation, which is critical when enemy artillery is anticipated to engage rapidly. Commanders understood that Russian forces would respond with indirect fire once contact was made, so any forward-deployed vehicles needed to endure that pressure long enough to continue their mission. Mobility, rather than heavy armor, was the true form of protection. The movement plan reflected this understanding. Instead of taking obvious routes, the unit would approach using low-lying terrain and natural depressions, staying below ridgelines and avoiding open fields where they could be easily spotted. Terrain that might seem slow or awkward on a map became an advantage by reducing the risk of detection by Russian drones. Every minute spent undetected increased the strategic value of the first engagement. Avoiding early contact was vital because surprise was one of the few advantages available. Russian UAV coverage had expanded significantly across the front, and once detected, any small unit risked becoming a target for artillery or loitering munitions. By maintaining a low profile and moving cautiously, the Bradleys controlled the timing and location of the first shot, rather than reacting to the enemy. A tactical choice that underscored their strategic discipline and understanding of battlefield dynamics. In such engagements, seizing the initial moment often dictates the battle's duration and outcome, as the first strike can unsettle an advancing force, creating confusion and hesitation that ripple through their ranks. The crews bore a heavy psychological burden, acutely aware they were outnumbered, and that reinforcements were too distant for immediate aid, meaning every decision had to be calculated with precision and an understanding of the broader tactical picture. Mistakes here couldn't be easily corrected or forgiven. A premature shot or exposure could lead to devastating counterfire or compromise the entire mission. Success depended on discipline, patience, and precise timing over aggression, reflecting a deliberate shift from traditional offensive postures to a more measured and calculated approach. Unlike conventional battles, success wasn't about kills or territory, but gaining time and imposing delays, slowing the enemy's advance enough to allow friendly forces to regroup or fortify key positions. Disabling a vehicle or causing confusion could shift the momentum of the Russian advance without spectacular destruction, leveraging psychological and logistical disruption to maximum effect. This strategy reflects modern warfare's reality. Small, well-equipped units shape the battlefield by creating friction where the enemy expects smooth movement, turning natural terrain features into force multipliers. The Bradleys were deployed not to overpower but to disrupt enemy plans at the most inconvenient moment, turning the enemy's strength against them through timing and terrain advantage. As they positioned with infantry close behind, the outcome remained uncertain, hinging critically on timing, visibility, and that crucial first engagement that could either buy precious time or lead to their quick defeat. The operation relied more on geography than firepower, demonstrating how terrain can dictate tactical possibilities and limitations. When Ukrainian UAV spotted a Russian mechanized column advancing toward Kupansk along a narrow road flanked by dense trees, they identified a tactical vulnerability that could be exploited. The terrain forced the Russian vehicles into a single-file formation with limited lateral movement, sharply curbing their maneuverability and making them susceptible to ambush. This choke point meant any disruption would ripple through the column, forcing it to compress and reorganize under pressure, a moment when command often falters due to the confusion and slowed communications. Ukrainian commanders aimed not for outright destruction, but disruption. Disabling the lead vehicle would force the Russians to deploy in difficult terrain, costing critical time and breaking their momentum. Bradley 1 exploited a slight elevation, securing a clear, concealed line of sight, and waited patiently for the column to fully commit to the narrow road, knowing firing too early would let the enemy halt outside the choke point and regroup, thereby losing the tactical advantage and possibly alerting enemy forces further down the line. This patient wait exemplified the calculated restraint required in modern asymmetric engagements, where the value of a single well-timed shot far outweighs the noise of indiscriminate fire. The crew's nerves were steady, their training evident as they prepared to strike with precision, understanding that their success would hinge not just on firepower, but on timing, coordination with infantry, and the ability to exploit the terrain's natural advantages to maximum effect. At about 2 kilometers away, the commander ordered the tow missile launched toward the lead tank, which quickly halted but did not explode, leaving the vehicle intact but immobilized. This unexpected failure caused the following vehicles in the column to break abruptly, collapsing their previously maintained spacing and halting the column's smooth, coordinated advance. The Russian forces, initially pressing forward with confidence, had to immediately shift from an aggressive, offensive posture to a constrained reactive deployment, losing critical momentum, an invaluable asset in mechanized warfare, where speed, mobility, and seamless communication dictate the timing and nature of engagement. Commanders scrambled under intense pressure to issue new orders. Drivers repositioned their vehicles amid the chaos and under extreme stress, and supporting infantry and artillery units adjusted their tactical plans on the fly, wasting precious seconds that Ukrainian forces had anticipated and prepared for through meticulous reconnaissance and training exercises. The choke point created by the stalled tank and the resulting traffic jam did not destroy the Russian column outright, but effectively stripped it of its initiative, turning what should have been a rapid advance into a complex logistical and tactical problem under continuous enemy fire and surveillance. Russian commanders responded swiftly, ordering armored units to maneuver around the choke point where possible, reorganizing into combat formations designed to push toward the flanks, in an effort to break through Ukrainian defensive lines, while simultaneously coordinating with artillery and air support units to suppress enemy fire. This costly transition reduced the immediate pressure on the Russians by allowing vehicles to seek new firing angles and positions, albeit while remaining under constant observation and threat from Ukrainian forces, employing advanced targeting systems and coordinated counterattacks. Then, a Bradley 2 infantry fighting vehicle, positioned cleverly within the Ukrainian defenses and utilizing cover effectively, engaged the maneuvering Russian units with its 25 mm Bushmaster cannon, aiming more to disrupt and delay than to outright destroy the vehicles, thereby effectively slowing or diverting their movement to break formation cohesion and complicate enemy plans. The Bushmaster cannon's rapid-fire capability combined with its accuracy forced the Russian units into reactive maneuvers, halting their advances and pushing vehicles into cover or less advantageous terrain, reducing their ability to maintain coordinated firepower. Recognizing the threat posed by the Bradley's precise fire, Russian commanders called in artillery strikes to suppress the infantry fighting vehicle's position, forcing Ukrainian crews to choose between enduring heavy bombardment or abandoning their strategically important firing positions, which would expose flanks and create new vulnerabilities. In response, Ukrainian countermeasures focused heavily on maintaining movement and unpredictability, utilizing the terrain, ranging from dense forests and uneven ground to urban rubble, and rapid repositioning tactics to undermine the effectiveness of Russian artillery and preserve operational flexibility under fire. These dynamic actions underscored the intensity and complexity of the battle, illustrating how even a single stalled vehicle could cascade into a significant tactical disruption within a larger mechanized engagement, demonstrating the critical interplay between technology, terrain, and tactical decision-making on the modern battlefield. Rather than staying at fixed firing positions, both Bradleys continuously changed their locations every few minutes to avoid becoming predictable targets. Their engagements were brief, consisting of short bursts of fire followed by immediate relocation. This tactic complicated enemy artillery adjustments since by the time artillery rounds impacted, the Bradleys had already moved on. Avoiding repetitive patterns was essential. Consistently using the same route or firing spot would have enabled Russian gunners to quickly correct their aim. By varying their firing angles, distances, and timing, the Ukrainian crews significantly increased the workload on enemy artillery teams, forcing them to chase moving targets instead of controlling them. Each missed artillery correction bought crucial additional time, which was the primary objective. As the exchange progressed, a Russian tank attempted to close the distance for direct fire, recognizing that the Bradley's advantage lay in standoff engagement. Closing the gap would allow the tank to bring its main gun to bear and potentially force a decisive confrontation. However, this aggressive move carried risks because the tank would be exposed during its approach. The Ukrainians responded deliberately and precisely. They launched a tow missile that hit the tank and halted its advance. Although the tank did not catch fire, it lost momentum, effectively neutralizing the immediate threat. Moments later, a second missile struck lower, targeting the tank's running gear, destroying its tracks, and rendering it immobile. This was tactically significant because an immobilized tank loses its offensive pressure despite intact armor. Without mobility, it cannot reposition, pursue, or threaten effectively, becoming a stationary weapon system that demands support rather than providing it, shifting the burden back onto the attackers. This sequence mirrored earlier patterns in the engagement. Russian forces attempted to regain momentum, but Ukrainian crews responded with measured force, steadily draining time and opportunity from the attackers. The battle did not feature dramatic destruction or spectacular feats, but consistently punished haste and rewarded caution. Every forced pause diminished the likelihood of a breakthrough before reinforcements could arrive. As minutes stretched into an hour, ammunition dwindled and fatigue set in, yet the delay held firm. Russian forces had not broken through, and Ukrainian defenses remained intact. The immediate crisis eased, although the larger conflict was far from resolved. When Ukrainian reinforcements finally arrived, the immediate threat subsided, but the fight was not over. Intelligence soon confirmed Russian forces were regrouping for another assault, with increased movement behind the front lines, vehicle repositioning, and command activity indicating preparation rather than withdrawal. Ukrainian commanders recognized that waiting through the night would allow the enemy to reset on their own terms, so they chose to act preemptively. The decision to launch a night operation was deliberate and calculated, as darkness shifts the advantage to forces equipped with modern sensors. Ukrainian units had learned to capitalize on this. Thermal optics enabled them to detect heat signatures even in low visibility, while reduced light impaired enemy awareness and slowed their reaction time. At night, mistakes multiply for forces relying solely on visual contact. The Ukrainian column advanced with Bradleys leading and infantry following closely behind, a formation designed so the vehicles provided protection and early warning, allowing the soldiers to move swiftly once contact was made. Progress was deliberate and controlled, emphasizing silence to avoid revealing their presence. The first obstacle was a Russian observation post guarding the approach, manned by soldiers who hadn't detected the Ukrainians. Instead of gunfire, the infantry advanced silently and neutralized the post without shooting, preserving surprise. Thermal sensors then revealed a hidden Russian tank. During daylight, it would blend with terrain, but its engine heat exposed it. Destroying it outright risked revealing their location, while leaving it operational risk to rear attack. They chose a middle path. A Bradley vehicle targeted the tank's optics and communications with precise cannon fire, blinding it without destruction. Disabled, the tank lost control, allowing the column to advance without triggering a larger response. The main engagement followed, with a Bradley firing on Russian artillery, while infantry moved toward trenches. Suppressive fire pinned defenders as soldiers cleared positions in close combat. The swift assault aimed to disrupt coordination rather than hold ground. Russian armored reserves counterattacked before dawn, but were too late. The last TAW missile halted a leading vehicle. Infantry anti-armor weapons eliminated immobilized vehicles, stripping enemy mobility. By first light, Ukrainian forces held former Russian positions as enemy troops withdrew. The night operation didn't annihilate a brigade, but neutralized the threat of a renewed offensive. This battle wasn't about decisive victory, but preventing a dangerous chain reaction. Despite superior Russian numbers and equipment, they lost something critical: time. Every delay in stalled advance worked against them, turning pressure into hesitation. The lesson is clear. In modern warfare, time is a weapon against larger forces. Small, disciplined units can hold off stronger opponents by acting faster, choosing ground carefully, and making quick decisions. Speed of judgment outweighs sheer mass when plans unravel. For American audiences, this is today's battlefield reality. No clean victories, only difficult choices under intense pressure. Subscribe to Battle Report for clear, insightful analysis shaping this conflict. As the conflict continues to evolve, it becomes evident that technology and adaptability are reshaping traditional combat doctrines. Drones now play a pivotal role in reconnaissance and precision strikes, allowing forces to gather real-time intelligence and engage targets with minimal exposure. Cyber warfare also increasingly disrupts command and control systems, complicating communication and coordination on both sides. These developments underscore the necessity for modern militaries to integrate electronic warfare capabilities and agile tactics alongside conventional arms. For those seeking to understand the complexities of this ongoing war, staying informed through detailed, on-the-ground analyses like ours is vital. We will continue to bring you in-depth reports that illuminate the shifting dynamics and human realities behind the headlines. Moreover, the human element remains at the core of these engagements. Morale, training, and leadership often tip the scales where technology meets the battlefield. Units that can maintain cohesion under fire and adapt to unexpected challenges typically outperform those relying solely on hardware superiority. This conflict highlights that even with advanced equipment, the resolve and ingenuity of soldiers profoundly influence outcomes. As the war progresses, observing how both sides innovate tactics and leverage their strengths will be crucial for understanding future warfare trends.